You're 67. You just received your final paycheck. You sit down, open your retirement account, and run the numbers one last time. But then another number catches your attention. Not your account balance. The number of years. The years you spent telling yourself, I'll save more next year. The years you spent playing it safe. Waiting for the right time. Convincing yourself you were making the smart choice. Except, you weren't being smart. You were being scared. And that fear may have cost you far more than any stock market crash ever could. Here's what almost nobody tells you about retirement mistakes. The ones that ruin people usually aren't dramatic. It's not buying the latest meme stock. It's not getting terrible financial advice. And it's not even living through a market crash. When researchers study what retirees regret most, they keep finding the same pattern. The deepest regrets usually aren't about money they lost. They're about time they lost. Time spent waiting. Time spent being too cautious. Time spent putting off decisions until it felt too late to make a real difference. One widely cited study from the Employee Benefit Research Institute found something fascinating. When retirees are asked what they'd do differently if they could go back and relive their working years, they rarely point to one terrible investment. Instead, they say they wish they'd started saving earlier, before life became more expensive, before kids, before mortgages, before there was always another reason to wait. Because investment losses can often be recovered, time can't. And that difference is what this entire video is about. So why do so many intelligent people fall into this trap? It isn't because they're lazy. It isn't because they don't understand math. It's because of something psychologists call hyperbolic discounting. Behavioral economist George Ainsley spent decades studying this tendency, and he found that people consistently choose smaller rewards today over much bigger rewards in the future, even when they know the future option is the better deal. When it comes to retirement, this bias doesn't always make you spend more. Sometimes it makes you do nothing. It convinces your 35-year-old self, your 45-year-old self, even your 55-year-old self, that future you will somehow figure everything out. As if that person is a complete stranger, someone else's responsibility, until one day, future you becomes present you. And suddenly, there isn't much future left, but that's only half the story. There's another psychological force working against you. It's called present bias. In simple terms, your brain gives far more weight to a small cost you feel today than to a much bigger reward that's still decades away. Think about what that means for retirement. Let's say increasing your retirement contribution by just 2% means your paycheck is a little smaller this month. You'll notice that immediately. But the extra $150,000 that decision could grow into by the time you're 65, that feels distant, abstract, almost imaginary. Your brain isn't wired to compare those two outcomes fairly. It turns today's smaller paycheck up to full volume and turns the future payoff into background noise. So what does this actually look like in real life? It usually doesn't look reckless. It looks responsible. It looks like leaving your retirement account on autopilot for 10 years because changing anything feels risky. It looks like keeping most of your money in cash or other safe investments well into your 40s because market drops feel more real than long-term growth. It looks like putting off a contribution increase that would take 5 minutes to set up because there's always a reason to wait until life feels a little more stable. Now let's make this more practical. Imagine two people. Both start investing at age 30. Both have $50,000 already saved. Both contribute $6,000 a year. The only difference is this. The first person increases their contribution by just 1% of their income every 2 years. It's such a small change they barely notice it on their paycheck. The second person keeps contributing the same amount year after year. They tell themselves they'll ramp things up later, once they're making more money. Fast forward to age 65. Assuming their investments earn an average annual return of 7%, the first person retires with roughly $180,000 more. Not because they found better investments, not because they timed the market perfectly, just because they made a few small, boring increases over the course of 3 decades. Now imagine a third person. Same starting balance, same income, same career path, but they don't make any changes until they're 45. For the first 15 years, they keep saying they're just trying to get stable. Then they finally get serious. They increase their contributions aggressively, much faster than the other two. And yet, they still retire with less money than the person who simply started making those tiny 1% increases at age 30. The math is almost cruel. Time in the market beats intensity of effort. Every single time. You can't outwork a decade you never invested in. And that brings us to one of the biggest misconceptions about retirement planning. You've probably heard people say, "Don't worry, you can always make catch-up contributions in your 50s. And it's true. Catch-up contributions are real. The IRS allows people nearing retirement to contribute more for exactly that reason. They absolutely help. But they don't solve the real problem. They increase how much you invest during the final stretch. What they can't do is give you back 20 years of compound growth that never happened. A dollar invested at 32 has more than 30 years to grow. A dollar invested at 52 has about 10. No catch-up strategy changes that. It can make the last decade better, but it can never make it equal to what those first decades could have produced. That gap should make you stop and think. But here's what makes this mistake so dangerous. It never feels like a mistake while you're making it. If you're the kind of person watching a video like this, chances are you're not reckless with money. You probably have a retirement account, maybe a 401k, maybe an IRA. You check the balance every now and then. You feel responsible. And strangely enough, that's exactly where the trap begins. Because this isn't a mistake careless people make. It's a mistake careful people make. Being disciplined creates the illusion that you're making progress. You contribute consistently, so you assume you're on track. But consistency at the wrong pace is still the wrong pace. Researchers who study retirement outcomes have found that some of the people most likely to reach retirement underprepared aren't those who never saved. They're the steady savers. The people who never miss a contribution, but never increase it either. Nothing ever forces them to stop and ask, is what worked 10 years ago still enough today? And here's the surprising part. This doesn't just happen to people with lower incomes. It happens across the entire income spectrum. High earners often assume they're safe because the dollar amount they're investing looks impressive. But if you're contributing the same $15,000 every year while your salary grows from $90,000 to $180,000, you're actually saving a smaller percentage of your income over time. On paper, the number stays big. In reality, your savings rate is quietly shrinking. It feels like progress, but it's really erosion, just hidden behind bigger numbers. Meanwhile, someone with a more modest income falls into the exact same trap for a different reason. They choose a contribution rate early on because it's all they can afford. Then life stays expensive, raises come and go, but the contribution never changes. Different starting points, same outcome. A decision made years ago quietly outlives the circumstances that made it reasonable. And if you think about it, how many moments in adult life actually force you to revisit that decision? Nobody sends you a notification at 38 saying, your retirement contribution hasn't kept up with your income. There's no dashboard that flashes red when responsible slowly turns into not enough. For most people, the first real warning comes far too late. It's the moment we started this video with. You're 67. You're running the numbers, and you realize the gap can't be closed anymore. The adjustment that would have taken 5 minutes at 35 would now require an entirely different retirement. So let's state the real mistake as clearly as possible. It isn't undersaving. It's underadjusting. It's setting a contribution rate once, in your 20s or 30s, and then letting inflation, pay raises, and rising living costs slowly reduce its impact over the next 30 years, while feeling like you've been doing everything right. The good news is that the solution is incredibly simple, and that's exactly why it works. It's not about finding the perfect investment. It's not about taking bigger risks. It's about setting up automatic escalation, a simple rule that increases your contribution rate every year or every couple of years, ideally whenever you get a raise. That way, future you isn't depending on present you to remember or to suddenly feel motivated enough to make the change. Most retirement plans let you set this up in just a few minutes. Some even let you increase your contribution automatically by 1% every year until you reach a limit you choose. You make the decision once, and the system does the rest. That tiny feature matters far more than most people realize, because every financial strategy that depends on you remembering to take action next year is quietly betting against human nature. Automatic escalation removes that bet completely. Instead of asking yourself to make the same difficult decision over and over again, it simply happens, the same way your paycheck simply arrives. And there's one last thing that's worth saying. This isn't about guilt. Nobody wakes up at 30 and decides to sabotage their retirement. This mistake is almost invisible. It's built from 100 perfectly reasonable decisions to wait, stacked on top of each other over decades. So the answer isn't shame. It's a 5-minute system change that makes the easy decision and the right decision the same decision. The people who avoid that 67-year-old moment of regret usually aren't the ones who made one brilliant investment. They're the ones who made small, boring adjustments, automatically, long before they ever felt any urgency. They didn't beat the market. They simply refused to let their own hesitation compound faster than their investments did. So I'll leave you with the same question we started with. When you think about retirement, don't think about your balance. Think about the years. The years between today and the day you'll either feel grateful for a decision you barely remember making or wish you'd stopped waiting. You don't need a better investment. You probably don't even need a bigger plan. You just need one 5-minute adjustment made today before later quietly becomes never.